X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is the weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach, and I would like to welcome all of you to your mutant alternative to NPR's Code Switch, because...
That's what we're going to compare ourselves to today. I like that.
We are going to be talking about topics that, as two white dudes who, live in the suburbs or in the rurals as I do, we may not have the best views to talk about this, and we would have loved to got someone a little more qualified to bring some color to this, if we wouldn't have waited until Saturday to start reading these and realize that we were not prepared.
Hey,
but I think we're going to do good.
I think we're going to be okay, all right? But we have to warn people, because usually you tune in for that good X-Men content. There's not going to be a lot of X-Men in the stories that we talk about today. In fact, the majority of the characters we're going to talk about are cops, they're 5-0, they're feds, they're narcs. But I promise there's some X-Men stuff hidden inside this episode that you're going to want to listen to. Right?
These are X-Men stories, to be clear.
Yes, they are.
It's just in early 2000, guys, the world was in a weird place. For some of you youngins out there, if we have any teens listening to this, you may not know what 2002 to 2005 America was like, but boy, was it wild. The Shield had just come on. People were real into dirty cops and all this stuff. And it's not as great of a look in, the year of our Lord, 2019. But it sure is. We should probably just get into it instead of, walking around this.
Yeah, okay. So our first book is the 4-issue miniseries, Volume 2.
It's not
Volume 2?
No, that's not our first book.
Oh, I'm sorry.
How dare you?
I got him out of order.
How dare you? Because our first book is our Patreon request from Patreon supporter Mike Rappin, who he went on over to patreon.com/XavierFiles. He supported, and he got an entire episode crafted around his suggestion. And his suggestion was Mutant X. Nope.
You got it wrong, too. We're 0 for 2.
We both screwed up. It's District X, numbers 1 through 6, Mr. M.
Yeah.
This was written by David Hine, with art on 4 of the issues by David Yardin, 1 issue by Lan Medina, and 1 issue by Mike Perkins. So, on art, these are all guys who are still working in comics and still doing pretty good.
Oh, yeah. I like the way this looks. This has a nice naturalistic feel to it. And this is an interesting series, to say the least, my friends. So if you don't like a certain X-Man as a cop, you may not enjoy this particular series, but I liked it.
This is Cop Bishop.
Yes.
Working in what's essentially the mutant ghetto of New York, which I like as a concept. I really do. I like mutants as a subculture. We've talked about it on this podcast just over and over. I think there's a lot of really cool ideas that happen in this, post-Morrison era of X-Men. Execution, a little iffy on almost all of them. But I like some of the ideas on it.
I like that this is just such a departure from regular X-Men comics. Our whole story begins with crooked cops getting involved with a situation where there is a siren-like mutant who the situation ends up in a police shooting that is then covered up by one of the partners. I don't know. I feel like right off the bat, we're in, a very specific real world And it doesn't feel like a superhero comic. It feels like, its own universe to a certain extent.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing that I think doesn't work as well is the fact that, Bishop is a main character in this, and he is brought in by the FBI, sent to help the NYPD solve this case in Mutant Town. But he's partnered up with Officer Izzy Ortega, who is a crooked cop who doesn't seem to face any repercussions of covering up police shootings and several other things, which is not great.
Yeah, Izzy's got his moments where he's a good guy and some moments where he's not. So, we're dealing with sort of that gray area AMC protagonist kind of character here, right? When did the
Shield actually... Okay, so this is 2 years after the Shield came out. So they were saying, okay, that's a very popular show. How can we make Michael Chiklis Cuban?
Yeah, when does The Wire come out? I feel like we're maybe seeing an influence there, too,
The Wire came out in 2000. Okay, so yeah, The Shield, The Wire. This is very much a product of its time.
Yes.
For good and for bad. Because I think what you're touching on, there's a lot of interesting ideas. Actually, there's one more TV reference I want to find out. When did Ice Cube start working on Law and Order SVU? Since 2000, or Ice-T, excuse me. Yeah, because there's a point where someone literally says, yeah, there's this new street drug that all the kids are doing. It's called toad juice. Gets them real high. Get them from licking this toad boy. And that's not realistic. Also, I ran their numbers in my head on how much toad juice they were producing. The fact that toad juice, as a plot point, will super murder anyone who's not a mutant who does this drug.
Well, can we talk about what toad juice is? Because I feel like folks may have never heard of this series, and toad juice is literally, there is a kid who looks like a toad
He's not the toad, though.
No, not the toad. But his tears, his sweat, everything that comes out of his body makes mutants like super high. His mom is addicted to him to the point where like she's licking him and strung out. And I just thought this was such, I don't know. I thought it was really fun and a brilliant concept for like what's behind a certain drug war that's going on in this storyline, that there's this kid that, I don't know. I thought it was cool. You didn't like it? I thought it was
super gross, and I did not like thinking about it.
Oh, it is disgusting. So super gross. Yeah, it's so super gross. But I think that one of the things this story does pretty successfully is kind of identify why the humans are kind of put off by, the mutant subculture that's going on in this town, because almost all of the characters that we see that have powers are not fun powers. No. One of the crime bosses, when he gets angry, he smells really bad. We have this toad kid Frank, who gets people high from his secretions. The detective's wife goes into like a protective gelatinous orb at night, and then sloughs it off during the day.
Can we talk about his wife? Yes. He has a lot of angst about his wife.
Yep.
And having to sleep in a separate bed with essentially a wife who's too sweaty to sleep next to.
Yes.
And as a married man, I'm running this in my head, and I'm trying to figure out, it's like, well, like, you can still, like, cuddle, and you can still do pretty much anything you need. It's just when she's asleep, she's gonna be in a bubble. But you shouldn't be worried about that, my dude. You shouldn't be so angsty. Also, his wife goes on a pro-Castro rant for like a whole page out of nowhere, and it never gets brought up again, and I'm baffled by it.
Well, there's some Che Guevara t-shirts in this, and, there's a lot
There's a very good Remember Genosha t-shirt.
Yes.
That I wish you would see more of that in Marvel. It makes it feel more like a subculture because, of course, the murder of, 14 million mutants would be a big deal.
Absolutely. I mean, what I think works here is the world building. I do think that, if you're coming here for Bishop to be Bishop-y, he's not. He's basically just a cop who occasionally has powers that fit into, the storyline because he can absorb and redirect. And he really only uses his powers like maybe twice, maybe 3 times. I really do like the ongoing investigation of the 2 rival crime families going back and forth and trying to steal the Toad Juice kid back and forth from each other. I think the thing that doesn't work so much for me is the ongoing background villain is the titular Mr. M, and that part of the story just was weird to me, and I don't feel like it really wrapped up very well in these 6 issues.
Are you talking about Absalon Mercator? Which is
yes.
a very evil villain name. His name is Absalon.
Well, you don't know he's evil at first because he fixes toasters for his neighbor, and that's not a big deal. But, by the end, he's basically like, God incarnate, and they have to figure out how to stop him. But, that part of the story doesn't work as well. I think when they're doing the whole we're on the street beat kind of deal going from scene to scene, I like that part of the story. I think that's interesting.
I'd agree. I think there is interesting plot. I think there is some interesting ideas here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not personally a fan of all the ways it develops.
Yeah.
I would love to see. I would honestly love to see an idea like this be tried again in 2019. Like, let's get out of the Age of X-Man and let's get into this mutant subculture stuff, because I think there's so much potential in stories like that. And that's why I'm fascinated by this era of comics, because there's so many things that they've never tried before and they've never tried since.
Yeah, I think that it's a bold, idea. It's a bold choice. I think that it points the, Morrison's idea of Bishop as a detective in a way that is a little bit more interesting and palatable, as opposed to whatever was going on in the new X-Men run, which I'm not a huge fan of.
It's not on our list, but do you think this story's better than Murder at the Mansion?
No, but
Okay.
I think we need to.
Okay.
I think we do need to identify that, and I've had a lot of conversations with people about this. Is that, Bishop? Nobody really knows what to do with him after the 90s. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there is this reinvention of him. I've had conversations online, back and forth on Twitter with Everett Christensen about this, and his uncomfortability with Bishop being a black man and being a cop, regardless of whether he's a future cop or present cop or whatever it is. And I can kind of, I don't come from that perspective, but I understand where he's coming from, that, just the setup of this alone is a little bit interesting. I think it's more palatable here. Just because he just seems like he's a normal detective, except occasionally when he uses his powers.
I think Bishop comes out better here because the 2 other cops that we see in this story are so obviously worse.
Yes.
We know they are bad, corrupt dudes. Bishop, there's a lot of subtext that doesn't look great if you reevaluate it, but within the context of these 6 issues, he turns out pretty okay. I would say he's a little bland in these 6 issues, but
yes, but I think that works in his favor because it lets the world go around him. You know what I mean? The covers make it seem like Bishop is the main character. He's not. He is a player in this story, and he allows it to move forward, but he's not the main character, and I think that works to the story's benefit. I think that what I'm seeing here is kind of what I would have wanted out of, let's say, Claremont's Extreme X-Men stuff, where, trying to tackle some things that are more on the ground, not superhero-y flying through the sky, blowing things up, but things that are a little bit more concrete and local, shall we say. So where do you think this goes on our list?
Well, we have 183 stories on our list, ranking every X-Men story ever. The top story is Days of Future Past, followed by Astonishing X-Men Gifted and God Loves Man Kills in our top 3. In our bottom 3, we have NYX, Phoenix Legacy of Fire, and The Draco.
Oh boy.
And yeah, guys, we gotta keep saying it because it doesn't stop being false that the Draco is bad.
The Draco is still there, whether we want it to be or not.
So, yeah. So I'd say this is a pretty top-heavy list. There's stories that I like that are in the bottom half of this list, just to be clear. So, where do we think District X, Mr. M, comes in on this list? Let me throw out a comparable story that I think this is a good amount better than.
Okay.
And that is Poptopia at 163.
This is definitely better than Poptopia, I would say. But I like where we're starting, that end of the list. But I do think that this is maybe a little higher up in the list. It tells a cohesive story. It's taking some risks. And I think it's pretty successful in trying to capture the zeitgeist of this era of cop TV. Even if some of its elements don't work as strong as some of as maybe we would like. Mm-hmm. So how about this as like a comparison point? Up at 146, we have Murder Grandpas. And under that, we have Extreme X-Men Expose. I was just talking about Extreme X-Men. Is this better than those, or are we going lower than that?
This is probably better than that Murder Grandpa's story, but just a couple spots up from that at 143 is that Savage Wolverine two-parter, Come Conquer the Beasts, where Wolverine deals with poaching.
Yeah.
And I think that story's better than this.
Okay. And below that, we have The Death of Colossus in Uncanny 390. Is this better than that?
No, but I think it's better than 145, which is Monet Vampire Hunter from Generation X.
All right. So we're saying this is going in where? This is going to be our new 145. Perfect. All right.
That is District X 1 through 6. Mr. M.
Mr.
Awesome.
M. All right. I'm sorry I jumped the gun on our... please make the thank you. I'm interrupted.
I did. I successfully said both thank you and Mike. So that's where I was going with that. We can say thank you, Mike, again. He deserves it.
Thank you, Mike.
But yeah, you did jump the gun.
Apologize.
For a forgotten story. I don't think this has ever been printed in trades, but it just got added to that app this year, or I guess last year at some point, because I remember first reading this in floppies because it was the only way.
Yep. So what is this, Zach?
This is X Factor Volume 2.
Yes. So should I be expecting either the Cyclops or Havoc version of the team here?
Nah, you shouldn't even be expecting the Jamie Madrox version of the team or the Shard version of the team. Yeah, or the one that Polaris ran when they were a company.
Yeah, this is not an X team centric book, though we do get glimpses of the new X-Men throughout the 4 issues. But you want to give a little distillation of what we're looking at here? Because this is a very interesting book that has a lot of parallels with what we were just talking about.
Yeah. So this is written by Jeff Jensen, who's a prose writer who did this, a Captain America, or a backup in a Captain America story, and then a story in X-Men Unlimited, which might be one of the worst stories in X-Men Unlimited, which is saying something. It's the story where Beast falls in love with a cat mutant that Jean Grey reads the cat mutant's mind and finds out it's not a mutant that looks like a cat, it's a cat that kind of looks like a person. And it's not good. But Arthur Ranson, who did Extreme X-Men Expose, also does the art on this. And this is interesting. This follows 2 agents on the FBI's Mutant Civil Rights Task Force, Agent Catherine Gray and Agent Aaron Curse. And they go and they solve 4 mutant crimes.
Mm-hmm.
One of them's... I mean, what are the crimes, Adam?
Well, they kind of... Some are more interesting than the others. One involves, a mutant that has been lynched onto the Hollywood sign. Another one involves... I liked this one a little bit. I thought this was more interesting, was the baseball player who is secretly a mutant and has the home run record. So, and then there's a hate group that they track down. And what's the fourth one?
The fourth one is they find out there's a conspiracy within the FBI.
Yeah, and they were and somebody wants to blow up the X Mansion, right? I think that's.
By the way, that the bomb in the X Mansion stuff gets resolved off panel.
Yeah.
Intentionally, and that's a good thing. That just tells you what kind of story this is that's not the important part. I think that Jensen does an incredibly good job keeping it focused on these two humans and these two people who have good reason, even though they're on the Mutant Civil Rights Task Force, to dislike mutants. They have inherent biases.
Yeah, they maybe picked the wrong people for the task force.
They may have known what they were doing too.
Yes.
Remember, this is a government that owns mutant genocide robots.
Right, and it turns out that they're without them realizing it, they're part of a conspiracy.
Right, but I think it's interesting. So, Agent Catherine Gray, she had a child who was a mutant, and it was a child who had fire powers, but had an early onset of her mutant ability, and the child died because of it.
Yeah. And
the other agent, he had a severe injury trying to take down a mutant weapons dealer.
Yes. Who basically withers his right arm. So he's getting a bionic replacement. Very, very Shield-like there. But I guess they have access to that in the FBI.
That actually made it feel not realistic, but acknowledging this is still a Marvel Universe comic. He can get a robot arm. Yes.
And the other thing that really makes it feel almost like The Marvels by Busiek is the occasional appearances of one of the new X-Men or the new X-Men as a team, but they're never, they're either seen individually, or they're seen in shadow, or they're seen as someone is sort of passing out. So you never really get a good look at them, but they're there and that they're on the case too. But we're seeing this from
that. Yeah, I love that.
I think it works really well.
It's an incredibly powerful use of imagery and a very good shorthand to put you in the position of these agents that are saying, yeah, I as a reader, I know the X-Men are okay. They're the good guys here. But you don't trust them. Mm-hmm. You don't know what they're going to do. And it starts to turn the wheels in your head of, okay, this is why they're hated and feared, isn't it?
Well, and I think what the series does really well is, especially with the main character who is the one with the disfigured arm, he is really grappling with his own just straight up intolerance and racism. And he's sort of trying to regulate that with his faith as well. And I think that's really an interesting way to have a POV character in an X-Men comic book. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it was fascinating because over the course of these 4 issues, he grows as an individual.
Yes.
He challenges his own biases. There's in issue 3, the case that they're trying to solve is the bombing of a mutant church. Mm-hmm. And it was a sanctuary church. So it was run by humans, but had a lot of stuff for mutants who were refugees or just on the run for whatever reason. And he has a conversation with his partner, and he pretty much he talks about the church that he was in, and she asks, are you guys a sanctuary church? How do you guys deal with mutants? Because he's a very religious man. And it takes him another issue, but he gets to a point and he says, we voted on it, the church voted it down, and I sat there and I did nothing.
Right.
I didn't vote one way or another. I let my own uncomfortability with this new thing, my own racism get in my way.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the series, he's not a perfect guy, but he has learned that, you know what, I need to challenge my own biases and move forward. And I think that's, for me, that's something that, is relatable. As I was, growing up, I had to start realizing, hey, maybe some of the stuff that I said and did in high school was kind of terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I need to change myself. And I think that's a very powerful realization for a lot of people. And I think this comic gets it across just very well.
Yeah, I do think that if he was the only POV character, that, there's something a little bit slight about, the white man learning about his own racism. But
yes,
it is balanced by Catherine Gray, who's African-American. Her storyline is also, I think, very interesting, though I wish it got a little more airtime, that her mother is part of sort of a mutant resistance group. She actually works with the X-Men. They kind of play her up as, a civil rights advocate, somebody who maybe worked on the original civil rights movement in the 60s, and is still carrying on the cause today. I liked that storyline too. I wish they had expanded on that a little bit more. It's kind of like the idea of, a child of maybe, let's say, the Black Panthers or something like that, or somebody who was working with Malcolm X and then having to put that into contemporary, focus for this particular story. I wish that it was explored a little bit more that way, but I don't know if the author was really comfortable with delving into that as much.
Yeah, I think there's, two real good, fascinating parallel stories, and two people who both develop over time. Like Agent Gray, she has to learn to care about that stuff and has to learn to get past her fear of what happened to her child and her anger of all that.
Yeah.
And it never gets fully resolved, which I think is good.
Mm-hmm.
This story doesn't end with a neat bow on it. Both characters are in a better place, but you don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that's a very good place to leave them. I would love to see these guys pop up again.
I would think it would be fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
And I got to give the series credit, because aside from just the two main characters and their POV, especially the second issue that explores this idea of this, world or home run champion baseball player who happens to be a mutant that could have cheated with his powers, but chose not to for his career, because the home runs thing, the baseball, actually focuses him away from using his powers. That's a kind of story that you would not usually encounter in an X-Men comic book. However, it is legitimately about a Marvel mutant, and it's interesting and has depth and it has humanity to it. So there's some really cool stuff happening here.
Yeah, I like this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think
the art is great. We didn't talk about that.
We haven't talked about that. It's really good.
The art is outstanding. And it's consistent throughout the whole thing. Very, very detailed, very realistic. It makes it feel lived in. It makes it feel, real. It makes you feel like these are real people. I think it works to its favor.
I do too. So let's look at how it's going to fare on our list. I'm going to throw out something that I think is a good starting point and a good comparison point.
Okay.
And that is Chamber 1 through 4 by Brian K. Vaughan.
Okay.
That's at 27 right now, so it's at a pretty good spot in our list.
I don't know if I would go that high.
Okay.
I don't know if I would go that high. I was looking closer to... Recently, we just did the initial Genosha arc.
Ooh, yeah.
Which has a lot of world building and has a lot of really good... sort of allegorical stuff about what was going on in the world at that time. I don't know if this is up there in our top 30, if only because there are some other X-Men stuff in between it that I think is just better. I'm looking at 33, Rogan Gambit. I'm going to revisit that
pretty good.
before
Rogan
I revisit
Gambit's
this.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I'm going to revisit Morlocks, I think, before I revisit this too.
Which is another one that's a very good point. I think, to me, Morlocks is the ceiling.
Uh-huh.
But I think you've hit the floor right there. Like, if it's not better than Welcome to Genosha, it's better than that first arc of X-Men 92.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, I gotta say, I think this is probably better than Wolverine Lord of the Vampires.
I do too.
Is this better than
too,
that?
in my heart of hearts.
Yeah. I think it might be a good 38, go right below Morlocks. They're a good comparison to each other.
Right below Morlocks and right above the first arc of X-Men Legacy?
Yeah. Does that work for you?
All right. That works great for me. That's a good showing for X Factor Volume 2.
Yes.
Good job, team.
Definitely worth checking out, guys. Some really, very unique stories from this universe that you wouldn't normally see.
That is true. And now our last story on this list. This is more recent. And Adam, we get to do a story with a high number, which is fun. I know people freak out about like, oh, numbers on comic books are so weird. It's fun when I get to rank a story that has a 500 in it.
Yes, and this is more of an actual like X-Men story than the other two we just
it's a story with Cyclops in it, and he talks.
Yep.
And Wolverine has chef knives instead of it.
Oh man.
This is Uncanny X-Men 130 to 134 Quarantine. It is written by Matt Fraction. Kieran Gillen comes in at 531, and I believe he scripts the rest of it. With Fraction just doing the plots. They were kind of co-doing this as Gillen was taking over the book. With art by Greg Land.
Oh boy.
And
oh boy.
Just to be clear, this is both a note for our listeners and a note for Adam. We're gonna avoid all of the standard Greg Land jokes because they're played out.
All right. Can I talk?
We are going to take a critical eye.
Can I at least talk a little bit about how everybody's smiling when they shouldn't be?
You can, but after I mention that, Paul Renaud does part of 534 as well.
Yes.
This is a story where all the X-Men get sick because of Sentinel nanobots. So they have to have replacement X-Men, a team of Storm, Dazzler, Pixie, Northstar, and Angel running around San Francisco. At the same time, Loeb, the CEO of the Sublime Corporation, is giving out inhalers to rich kids to give them mutant powers.
Yes.
And at the same time, Emma Frost, Phantom X, and Kitty Pryde have kidnapped Sebastian Shaw and are going to do things to him. Emma wants to murder him really good.
Yes. Which doesn't happen, but it's a great combination of characters that you would not have expected to be on this revenge mission.
Yeah, the revenge mission is, to me, far and away, the best part of this. Like, it's got some heart. You get some really good Emma content, which, Action Fraction was always so good at.
Wait, you mean your favorite part isn't that Collective Man is trying to take over Chinatown?
I do hate the Collective Man. He's Five Guys. All he is Five Guys, burgers, and fries, but a communist.
He really leans into that communism, too. It's interesting.
I know we said we were an anti-Fa podcast last episode, but I'm pretty sure that the Collective Man is more about all the bad parts of communism than he is any of the thing about, like, helping out your neighbor.
Oh, no, he just wants to extort everybody. That's all it is. But I thought this was so playful and fun, and it strangely does still work. Like, this plotline probably shouldn't work. You've got most of the X-Men in the infirmary. You've got these weird sort of snobby rich kids becoming a version of the original five. You've got this revenge plotline where Emma has essentially selected the devil on her shoulder and the angel on the other. And it all does sort of tie together and work pretty well. Would you agree?
I think the story mostly works. I think the Fraction run as a whole on Uncanny X-Men is pretty mixed. And Fraction is a writer that I absolutely love. He's written my favorite comic book of all time. So I like the dude.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get it twisted. That Fraction, very good. I got scared to take a picture with him at a con once, and instead I went and ate hot dogs with friend of the show, Luke Hare.
Okay.
Yeah, it was him and Chip Zdarsky. So that would have been a very good selfie, and I got very, very stage fright. I'm bad at cons. I've not told this story, and it's also relevant to this issue, and I think it'll pivot us in a good direction. So may I tell it?
Yeah, go for it, man.
At that con, I got one of Matt Fraction's issues that I had bought off the shelf before I'd really started getting comics, but it was like the first modern X-Men comic I ever bought.
Uh-huh.
I got him to sign it at that con, and he was very nice. Fraction's a nice guy. A year and a half before that, at my local con, Greg Land was there, and I brought that comic, but I was too intimidated by Greg Land to get it signed.
Interesting.
I was scared of embarrassing myself in front of Greg Land, which at this point is absolutely wild to think about.
Well, I will say that Greg's art is at times a real challenge in this story, and in other times I think it looks really great. It goes back and forth from being something that I think is really, really well done to something that it's like, what is he doing with these facial expressions? It's very, very interesting the way that he does the acting of the characters in his story. As I mentioned before, characters smile in scenes where you're not sure why they would be. There's poses that
they got really weird smiles too, and that's a constant even in a good Greg Land comic.
Yes. Yeah.
You want everyone to be frowning because if they start smiling, it's not going to be good.
Yeah. There are just some really fun things in here, though. The whole idea that the story culminates with a party in which everybody is using 5-hour energy drinks to turn themselves into members of the X-Men to fight the X-Men. I don't know. There's something
explicitly
kind of
not Adam X though.
Right. Yeah, that's a great little moment. But I love the little packaging on the bottles. It's fun. There's some really silly fun stuff here that does still work.
You can become one of the U X-Men, which is the new X-Men logo, but branded by a tech company, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Cyclops breaks down the walls of the party with a flamethrower, and Wolverine's holding steak knives, while Colossus just has a big old friggin' hammer.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's great.
There's some legitimately good stuff. I actually like the idea of the spoiled rich kids with mutant inhalers. Like, I want that at the end of the story, you get a character. She was the angel of the spoiled rich kids, and she just has all the extra inhalers, 5-hour energy shots, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's a thread that says, "Hey, we could come back to this." She would be fascinating because she's not even a villain. She likes the X-Men. She thinks they're really cool. She's just using their culture as dress up, and Cyclops does not like that.
Well, it's funny that
I think it would be great.
It would be, and I think it would work really well if it had gone in tandem with. Do you remember in the Uncanny Avengers arc when they turned Avengers Mansion into like a cosplay hotel? Did you ever read that?
Oh yeah, into a weird sex hotel.
Well,
yes,
I wasn't going to go there, but
read that time.
But I just think that
Adam, it was a sex hotel. You can't even pretend that was what they were doing.
There was some parallels, between those two ideas, and I think it lends itself to being comedic, but it still works as a premise.
I think it's saying something about each one of these stories that there's something I'd love to bring back in each of them. Like, I think in every one of these, there is a nugget of a super good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Execution's all over the place. But I think there's like a concept that's like, wow. Why don't we still do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I had fun reading this. I thought it has the same kind of light tone of humor that you might find in Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men. Loeb is just patently silly as a villain. And I enjoyed reading it. Even if it wasn't like, the best or the, most classic X-Men story of all time. I'm having trouble thinking about what I would compare this to, though, on the list.
Yeah, it's a tough one to kind of pat down because there's interesting elements like even the stuff where the plot isn't great, like the replacement X-Men, where there's not any real good plot. The character work, especially between Dazzler and Pixie, is fun.
Yeah. No, they're kind of like bonding as they go. They're making witty jokes about Dazzler's last album or Pixie's Welsh slang. It's well written, I think.
It's very tidy. It's very
tidy. At 141, we have the Children of the Atom arc, which did have some replacement X-Men. Is this better or worse than that?
I like this better than that.
Okay.
I think this is better than that. I think this is better than like 135, the X-Men versus the Avengers.
I was just looking there. I think that's true too. How high are you willing to go?
I don't think it's as good as 128, which is the A+X Iron Fist and Dupe and Loki and Sinister story. Which is another thing that Kieran Gillen worked on. Yeah,
that might be a good ceiling. I do think that this is better than Chamber fighting Omega Red in Gen X 10 to 12 or 10 to 11. Would you agree with that?
Ooh.
No?
I'm mixed on that.
You're partial. Okay.
I think I know for sure that it's better than 133 Astonishing X-Men Exalted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably better than the first issue of X-Men ever.
I would agree.
Let's be fair. So that puts it between that issue of Wolverine where he goes to a bar and confesses himself to Nightcrawler and the Murder Grandpas. No, wait, the Freedom Force story that I can't even remember what happens, and I did a whole episode on it. So it's probably better than 130.
All right, so it probably is our new 130 if we don't want to put it above Gen X 10 and 11.
I'm going to say don't put it above Gen X because, look, we didn't harp on it. The art's bad. This may be the worst Greg Land art on X-Men. Like, I think Greg Land has done some pretty decent stuff. I like his stuff on some books. This may be his worst showing.
Hey, he's a talented guy. It's just that page layouts are great. Detail, the way he draws, it's really good.
Years.
It's just, there's these distractions in the way in which he draws women, and the way in which he draws facial expressions that take you out of the story. He's a very talented guy that, has a distracting style.
I've said for years, give Greg Land a Transformers book.
There you go.
And watch that thing go buck wild because he can draw cars really well. Like,
yeah. Let him draw monsters, Let him...
Monsters and cars and just not people.
Yeah.
He'll be great because he can tell a really good story. Like, Greg Land is one of those creators that I would love to talk to. I would love to get his ear for like an hour and just talk to him about X-Men and his style and all this stuff. Because I think he would be incredibly fascinating. He's kept to himself for pretty reasonable reasons considering the internet does not like him. And the internet's a bad place.
And yet, he just completed, a pretty fun arc on Astonishing.
Yeah, his art on Astonishing was pretty good.
It was.
Not perfect, but pretty good.
All right, so are we putting this at 130? Is that what's happening?
I think we are.
All right.
Uncanny X-Men Quarantine is at 130.
Nice.
And that's a good list.
Yeah.
I think if not all good, every story here was interesting enough that if you've got some time, pick it up, take a look. You'll find something to like.
Definitely. All right.
I'd like to thank Mike Rappin for going over to patreon.com/XavierFiles one last time. He suggested a story that made this whole episode, and that's pretty neat. If you want to be like Mike, you can do the same thing. Go to that URL. If you pitch in at the $2 a month level, you can get an episode crafted around your decision. I can tell you, slots are filling up. We're getting into May, June timeframe.
Wow.
We're getting to the point where I have to bookmark where the 100th episode is going to be, which is weird to think about. But if you don't want an episode, if you pitch in at like the $1 a month level or higher or lower or whatever, you can get a couple of different features, like early access to what books we're going to be covering each week in the Battle of the Atom book club, so you can see what we're going to covering and read along and know what we're talking about as we're talking about it while you're listening to it in your earphones. Or a new feature that's been rolled out is a monthly Q&A session where I'm going to be answering your questions over a live video chat. And that's going to be exclusive for Patreon patrons, at least for a while. I haven't decided if it's just going to be like a timed until the next one comes out, you guys get it exclusively, or if it's going to be just for you. Maybe let me know how you feel about that. I don't care either way. If people want to see me talk for a half hour, more power to them. Weird choice on your part, but, you do you. And if you like any of this stuff, you can go over to XavierFiles.com. That's where I have all the episodes. That's where I have some news articles that if you're a major comic book news site, you can definitely legally get, which has happened. Or I'm bitter. I'm sorry. I shouldn't bring this stuff up. It makes me sore on the inside. So you can do that, or you can just, there's stuff. I got articles. I got cool things going on there. We just put up a really fun joke article about a retcon about the death of Wolverine.
That was funny.
It was all references to a podcast I don't think you listened to, Adam.
No, but I still thought it was funny.
Which is great. Which is absolutely great. Anyway, Adam, what you got going on? Where's your stuff?
Guys, you can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. New pages of Bish and Jube's Attack on the Mansion every X-Men Monday at adamrec.tumblr.com. I think we're going to be wrapping that up somewhere in early March, maybe the end of February, somewhere in there. We're getting to the end. And I just started a Patreon. So if you want to support, you can get over to patreon.com/adamrec. Zach, where can people find you?
Well, I already said that.
Did you? I'm missing cues, man.
It's okay. It's okay, Adam. This part of the show's autopilot for both of us, and we both understand it. That's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
That was a good episode.
We're good.
I liked all that stuff.
Good episode. Next week, we have a whole episode. I guess the theme is Cable.
Pew pew.
But these are not the Cable stories I think anyone would pick if they were doing...
No.
If you're going to go with your top 3 Cable stories, it does have a story I really like, so we're going to get to it. But until then, this has been Battle of the Atom, and we hope you survive the experience.